Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 5:06 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Would be grateful to have your contributions today. John Kerry is the outgoing climate czar of the Biden administration. They're just, of course, moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic. He's just heading over to be a part of the campaign to get Joe Biden reelected without Biden's involvement. But John Kerry, what was he doing with all of that American taxpayer money? And who worked for him while they were trying to control the weather? For more on this, I want to turn to Daniel Turner now, our friend, founder and executive director of Power of the Future, who joins us now. Daniel, good to talk to you, sir.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be on your program, Vince. Thanks.
John Kerry, apparently he has some secrets. What are they?
Yeah, he has this very powerful office. No one had ever heard of the International Climate Envoy before Joe Biden became president. But lo and behold, it must be in the Constitution somewhere because he has a taxpayer-funded office with a taxpayer-funded staff. Ostensibly, they have office space and they have a budget. And they have a goal, an agenda, but no one knows what it is. And when asked if he will share that information with the American people, which is what the government has to do, John Kerry just says, no, I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you anything. And this has been going on for years.
So if we know all sorts of things about, say, the executive office of the president. I could look up the salary of every single person who works in the White House. You can figure out their names. It's all public information. Why don't we have the same kind of level of detail about the special envoy for climate's office?
And you would think if they don't want to share this information, it's because we wouldn't really like what this information is. But yeah, there is no executive privilege here, which is what he has exerted. And I understand that certain offices, Christopher Wray probably the biggest example and maybe the biggest abuser, there are certain offices that do have classified information and confidential information. But John Kerry is not a CIA operative, right? And this is not national security.
And he's not the president who can invoke executive privilege to cover up this information.
Exactly. And we have all felt the effects of this green agenda. We're going on 3 years now of Joe Biden's green agenda. And look at your food prices. Look at your utility prices. Look at war in the Middle East, right? Everything is related to energy. But the biggest problem or the biggest issue on voters' minds is the economy and inflation and the cost of goods. And that's all driven by energy. So here's the guy who's making the international energy agenda, and no one knows what it is.
So it seems pretty important to know who's working in this office or has been and how much money we've been giving them. In particular, because this seems like the kind of office that is ripe for immense political corruption. If your office is dedicated to destroying American energy and advancing the interests of the leftist green movement, which of course also enriches China to a great extent, if those are your interests, boy, the types of people who work in that office, they've got to be a real murderer's row of crony capitalists here.
Oh, absolutely. And look how many hundreds of billions of dollars we have doled out for climate initiatives. And Joe Biden brags about it. We call it investing, but it's just taxpayer giveaway for wind and solar and EVs and nonsense. But who's lobbying the John Kerry office for this information? What meetings are they having? And as you said earlier, if I go to the Commerce Department and I ask, who did the Assistant Secretary of X meet with this week, they have to disclose that. And you have the right to know because you're a taxpayer, because they work for the American people. And John Kerry has invoked this secrecy. I don't have to share this information. What we're getting at is why we actually had to go to litigation. So my organization, Power of the Future, after years of being stonewalled on Freedom of Information Act, we finally had to sue them. And trust me, I am not a fan of having to go to lawsuits because they're expensive, they're draining resources, they're cumbersome. But John Kerry is not allowed to just say, I don't want to tell you what I'm doing, and you have no right to know what I'm doing. So litigation's our only recourse.
So is John Kerry's position that he's above the law?
John Kerry's position is that he may not say it exactly that way, but his actions, yes, he is above the law.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to tell you. You are not entitled to that information. And that's not the nation we're founded on, right? I mean, when you think of that great quote of John Adams, a nation of laws, not of men.
Yeah.
John Kerry's making us a nation of men, right? We are subject to his caprice. EV
Totally.
bans.
Totally.
Yeah, now we have an EV ban because John Kerry has willed it so, and that's not the way our government's supposed to function.
And isn't this the most typical thing too? Like, we always talk about, how it's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. The left's behavior here is like John Kerry gets executive privilege, but Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, is not entitled to any.
Exactly. And, I tweeted this a little while ago. If Trump is to win in November, I asked if he could make me the fossil fuel czar in January. And I guarantee you, if I am made the fossil fuel czar, I am not appearing before Congress. I'm not disclosing my staff. Give me unlimited money, unlimited budget. Give me the full authority of the government. And let's see if the New York Times is curious. Right?
Yeah.
Let's see if the Washington Post is like, hey, what is Daniel Turner doing all day as the fossil fuel czar? The response is going to be pound sand, because John Kerry has now set the rules.
Yeah, that's right.
rules
We could hide the nuclear football with you. That's where everything stays secret, right there in the climate / when you take over the fossil fuel czar office.
Exactly, right? And the only thing that will be different is that I will definitely be using private jets. And I will be proud of how many private jets I use. But, where's John Kerry? What was he doing those 3 weeks he was in Dubai, right? Or he was at the World Economic Forum at the beginning of this year.
That's key.
What did he do?
Who was he meeting with? I want to know about every meeting. I want to know every meeting. Give me every name, who paid for dinner, all of that. I'd love to know every detail. And that's how it works. This is something that Lloyd Austin discovered apparently recently, which is your personal life is gone. If you want to be a federal official who has immense power over the lives of American citizens, we are entitled to know the nitty-gritty about your life, including when you're incapacitated because of some surgery or hospitalization. Yep, we get to know about that. And especially when you're conducting business on our dime, supposedly in our interest, we should get to know every last detail about it.
Yeah, and aren't you just tired of the obfuscation of the green movement, right? The Inflation Reduction Act, they called it, but then you find out it's a climate bill. You hear all these stories, we're not banning gas stoves. Karine Jean-Pierre will laugh until they come out. Gas stove bans, right? The green movement has to constantly lie. They have to do sleight of hand. It's not that. Oh, it's something else. Heck, if you're following the Michael Mann, Mark Stein trial going on this week about the famous hockey stick, it's all about deception. It's all about half-truths and misguiding the American people. And John Kerry's just contributing to that. If there is climate skepticism, it's because people in the world like John Kerry have created that culture that we don't trust what they're saying. We don't trust their numbers. We know they're a bunch of deceivers and liars. And heck, if you are a climate scientist and you care deeply about this, you need to be standing on my side saying John Kerry's doing our cause damage. I want to see who joins me.
Yeah, it's so disgusting. And, of course, the secrecy is all because they're just prostituting out our government, which brings me to my next topic. We are replacing one John with another. John Podesta is coming in to replace John Kerry. What do you think of that? This is a Clinton guy for many years. He's definitely one of the kind of the dark arts operators on the left. Are you encouraged that John Podesta is taking the helm to control the weather for the Bidens?
There is probably no other individual alive right now who has had his hands in more dirty affairs than John Podesta. This guy has been around for 30 some odd years. He and his brother have a very powerful DC operation. And John Podesta has a lot of shady information in his background. I guarantee you this, John Podesta will never testify before Congress because they will ask him about his art collection. They will ask him about Jeffrey Epstein. Then they will ask him what his office is doing.
Also, the Steele dossier, by the way, he was responsible for coming up with this complete lie designed to debilitate the American presidency. He's not been charged with anything. He's not in prison. In fact, he's been awarded with a new job with immense power over our lives.
And he has never had any job in, as far as I can tell, in foreign policy or foreign affairs or in climate issues. And yet a foreign policy climate office, John Podesta is in charge of. So it makes you think that it's really not about climate issues or foreign policy. It is a grift. There's billions of dollars that I'd love to see what's going on.
So if I remember correctly, Podesta in the Obama White House was the big advocate to shut down drilling in Anwar, right?
He's been on the green movement forever. I don't remember if he was the leading charge of that, but I mean he's been a greenie, which it makes sense when you're someone like John Podesta. Of course, you follow that because the green movement is about power, and John Podesta is all about power. And so it's not surprising he's the one who has this position. And I would say nominated, but he's not nominated because there's no confirmation process. This is an enormously powerful role that is not accountable to Congress, that's not confirmed by the Senate. He just has the job. So there you go. That's the way government works now.
Yeah, definitely. And so an office surrounded by secrecy that Daniel Turner, with any luck, your group, Power of the Future, will be able to pierce for our benefit. Hopefully you're able to do it in time while we still have a country left. Daniel, thank you very much, as always, for your attention to detail and your excellent analysis. Really appreciate it, sir.
Thanks, Vince.
That's Daniel Turner, Power of the Future. Let's go to the phones here. I've got Phil calling in from Fredericksburg. Phil, line 1, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, I just want to say that I know your last guest said that they can't put Podesta in front of Congress. They can compel. They can ask, and he can refuse. I'm
Subpoena
just saying,
his tail, yeah.
This is a golden opportunity to get Podesta in front of Congress and start hitting him with all kinds of dirty information, man. This is the guy I really want in front of Congress. I'm telling you, we need to open this guy up like a surgeon.
I am totally with you for a bunch of reasons. One of them, of course, is the meddling in our elections. So Podesta deserves a lot of scrutiny for that because remember, in the lead up to the 2020 election, Podesta was a part of a group that was advocating that should Trump win the election, that it might be necessary for left-wing states on the West Coast to secede from the Union to register their objection to that outcome. So this guy is out of control, and a subpoena before Congress to testify, well-deserved. I'm with you, Phil.
Amen, Vince. Amen. From the Clinton crime family to Haiti money that disappeared to a voting irregularity-strewn election, man, let's get him in front of Congress, baby.
Phil, I always love Phil. All right, Phil, thanks for the call, man. Oh, man, he's the best. All right, let's see here. It is 5:19 now. Yeah, John Podesta. The guy's a wild man. I mean, and he was straight up. This was in the lead up to the 2020 election. It's just so important to remember the details because the left, you're watching it happen in real time right now. They want to gaslight you into believing that something that is not true is, right? So like Republicans are the reason the border is in crisis. They spend 3 years saying there is no crisis at the border. They want to convince you it's Donald Trump's fault that the border's wide open. It's totally brazen, but unfortunately, with a degree of repetition, they can convince some meaningful number of the public that, oh, that must be the case. It must be Trump's fault. Well, how is it Trump's fault? I don't know. I just heard that. That's what they said on the news. Have you ever met somebody like that? Who more about some news event than they do, and they tell you, like, but I thought it was Trump's fault. You're like, no. And you're like, I can't believe I've got to deprogram you, but let's sit down, cup of coffee, let's talk it out. And that happens. You've got to have these conversations with people. This is why it's like I'm always tortured. I'm like, go to especially like a family event or with friends. Like, do I really want to talk about politics with people? But if they bring it up, if they bring something up, I'm like, that's not true. It's not true. And I'll explain it why. And I'm nice about it. Of course, I'm always nice. I'm nice about it, but here's what I know. Here's what actually happened. And usually they either, like, oh, wow, that actually changed my perspective. Or they figure out a way to wiggle out of the conversation. Okay, got to go over here. Can't talk to you, weirdo. Fine, whatever. I don't care. But remember, if you go back to 2020, what actually happened? Well, the left was advancing this idea that Trump was stealing the election. It was Trump who was stealing the election because he was rigging the United States Postal Service to make sure that ballots didn't make their way in to support Joe Biden. Do you remember this? The Postmaster General was a guy called Louis DeJoy. He became the focus of the corporate media's obsession with how Trump was rigging the election. And at the same time, the New York Times reported in August of that year that there was something called the Transition Integrity Project going on with leaders like, yes, that's right, John Podesta, who played the part of Joe Biden in an election simulation. And in the simulation, Joe Biden refuses to accept defeat. And then they go and they convince Democratic governors in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina to certify Democrat electors instead. And they have states like California, Oregon, and Washington threaten to secede from the union unless Republicans would just accept defeat. It's so crazy. So they were openly planning a rigging back in 2020. And now this guy's in charge of controlling the weather. How's that going to go? How's that going to go? Stay with us on the Vince Coglianese Show. Good afternoon to you. 5:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A lot of headlines for you. In a moment, I want to share with you some updates. You remember that kid who was accused of wearing blackface to a Kansas City Chiefs game? It turns out, in the end, if you actually did some journalism, you would have figured out the other side of his face had red paint because he's wearing war paint, and he's a Native American kid. And then you're attacking him as a racist. I've got an update on that story. It's a heartwarming one. Again, 888-630-9625. Let's go to the phones. I got Chris calling in from Gainesville, line 1. Chris, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, sir.
I don't hear one Republican office holder in the Senate, the House, propose that we use the entire foreign aid budget to help the homeless and pay for social programs in this country. And that would, relieve some of the pressure on our budget.
Yeah, we need to bring back mental institutions. Honestly. We've got such an immense problem there, Chris.
Right. We need modern psychiatric hospitals.
Yeah.
Maybe get China to build them because they put them up in 6 months. But we need to put the mentally ill in hospitals where they can cared for, bathed, and medicated instead of running naked through traffic.
Well, it's a total sign of decay, right? I don't know about you, but I feel like I've never seen more panhandling in my life in the United States of America. It's everywhere. It's every intersection. Right. And I don't think everyone who's panhandling is homeless, but it is a sign of societal decay, and it's totally out of control, and it's totally unacceptable.
Yes, well, I've recently found myself homeless, and I can tell you that the people panhandling, if the government worked the way it should be, they wouldn't be out there panhandling. We all have to come together, and I would love a presidential candidate to pledge, if they get elected, they're going to bring two things to zero. One is homelessness, and one is illegal immigration. Those two things need to be zero. Not reduced, but zero, and we have the resources to do it.
Yeah, I'd love that. You know what I will say, though, in terms of homelessness, you're right. It's a symptom of the bigger problem, obviously. But right now, it's one of those things where it's like, it feels like you're pointing to a rug, and you're saying, that rug is dirty. The whole house is on fire. In terms of just the absolute priorities we have as a country, the crime is out of control. You've got the carjackings that are out of control. D.C. is so ridiculously violent. You got to keep your head on a swivel just to go in and out of the nation's capital. The borders are collapsing. The economy, as you point out, the economic conditions are a disaster. If you start to fix even one of those things, it begins to resolve some of the problems that lead to the very thing you're talking about, which is a growth in homelessness.
But we need to take away homelessness and illegal immigration from the courts. We need to say those are the two things that Republican politicians, when elected, governors, mayors, are not going to listen to courts on those two things, because the courts make it impossible for cities to clean up homelessness and make it impossible to get rid of illegal immigration.
Yeah.
We saw that last Supreme
And people
Court
are
ruling.
miserable with both. No question about that, Chris. You're right about that. All right. Hey, thank you. I appreciate the call on it. No, it's a good point. It's just one more sign. Speaking of signs, like everyone's got their signs out. They're all at every corner. And it's like, what is happening? What is happening? And I feel better. Do you ever get into that moral quandary? You're like, what do I do? Especially as a Christian, I just feel like I'm sitting there. I'm like, do I engage with the guy? I don't ignore people. I say hello, but not throwing up any money at the at the stop because I give to my church, we give to the charities, that kind of thing. Because there are places that do this responsibly. I have no idea what I'm giving to. I don't even know if this is a hustle. I don't know anything. All I know is you're standing there holding a sign. And sometimes they bring these babies out in the cold. You ever see this? They got the babies in their arms and like the immense cold. What are you doing with the kid out? And it pulls at your heartstrings. No question. No question. But it's a real commentary on where we are as a country right now, that's been totally normalized. People are being chased off of medians by the other person who's dominating the median. It's wild. It's wild. And also, you do think about the economics of it, too. You're like, can you clean up with that? Right? You be honest. Can you clean up with that? What do you make an hour doing that? If you park yourself in a nice neighborhood in Northern Virginia, stand on and you get ignored by, 19 cars, but every 20th car hands you a $20 bill, what kind of money are you pulling down an hour? Can you, I'm not, I know you're saying, like, you look at this and you're like, well, Vince, come on, they're on hard times. Maybe. I have no idea. I'm just saying, I'm having the same thought that I guarantee you have had, which is like, what are they doing? What is this? Also, I have to ask, for those homeless people within my voice, if you're, or panhandlers specifically, if you're holding a sign, can you please not have curse words on it? Because my kid is sitting in the car with me and it looks over, and some of them are written to be kind of like amusing to try and convince you to give them money. But don't, like for instance, I'll just be super explicit. In Northern Virginia, as explicit as I can be, in Northern Virginia, there was a panhandler. He holds a sign. He's out there all the time. It says, "Help an N-word out." Okay. But I don't want to explain the whole darn sign to my kid. Would you please? Come on. So the window doesn't get opened for me. Instead, that's when the distractions start. Hey, what's that over there? Then we're trying to convince the whole car to look off at this rather boring sight, so you're not staring at the guy holding the "Help an N-word out" sign. All I'm asking is, come on, please. If that guy fixes his sign, I'll throw a coin to him. I did see one a couple years back. This was like a decade ago. Somebody said, "I bet you can't hit me with a quarter." That was, honestly, that was funny. That was amusing. But it's bad. It's totally bad. We've got Ingrid calling in from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, line 1. Ingrid, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello.
Hi, Vince. We need to outsmart these people. They're not intelligent people. We need to go full Jason Aldean. Go out, interview people on the streets.
What do you mean by full? What do you mean full Jason Aldean?
His song was, it just went everywhere.
Yeah, try that in a small town. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the guy saying, "Pretty soon you're going to know me. You're too stupid to know who I am now, but you'll know me one day."
Yes.
And just the ridiculousness of, the border's secure, show the people running across the border. We've got to do a full-out blitz and just make everything go viral.
This is like one of the most common sense things anybody could possibly utter, Ingrid. The idea is
the way to do it.
The idea here is quite obvious. There are so many victims due to all of this that it's just a mountain of obvious content. You could just talk to all of them. You could do videos, you could do interviews, you do campaign ads, and just put it in front of the American people and be like, you want this for your family? Because these people are already suffering.
It's so obvious. And the thing is, with the Aldean song, you had every demographic, everybody talking about it. And they're like, well, this is true. This is true. They're defending themselves.
Yeah.
I don't see anything wrong with this song.
No, not at all. Not at all.
We just have to go full blitz. These aren't smart people. They have a bunch of ne'er-do-wells and miscreants, so that they can parade them around like puppets and get them to say what they want them to say.
And we're not living in normal times, and despite the fact that our institutions are trying to normalize all of this chaos, we should show people the abnormal and what's actually happening. Maybe it's not happening outside their house, but it's happening outside of a lot of houses. That's for sure.
Exactly, and there's so much abnormal. Come on.
I know.
But there are way more normal people than abnormal people. But we just have to be clear about it and put it out there.
This is where I plug.
In a creative way.
This is where I plug the Chris Plant Store. Right now, you can get your Remember Normal T-shirt on the Chris Plant Store. Hey, Ingrid, thank you very much. I appreciate the call.
Thank you so much. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Remember Normal? Yeah, it's a T-shirt. It's on the Chris Plant Store. Let's see here. I've got Judy calling in from Manassas, line 5. Judy, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. It's good to hear from you. Hey, I remember we were talking about the panhandlers back in the mid and early 90s. There was a husband-wife couple that was panhandling in Roslyn, and coming to find out, I don't know how they investigated it, but they found out they were living in a penthouse. They had full-time jobs, and on the weekends, they panhandle to make extra money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just kind of makes you really wary about what people are up to anymore.
Yeah. I mean, every so often you look out there and you're like, man, what if I just got out there on the corner for like an hour? Maybe I could like get a nice steak dinner tonight or something. You know, just like. But they're living in a penthouse, and so this was well publicized in the 90s.
Yeah, I want to say it was sometime in the 90s because I was stationed here back then.
Got it.
But anyways, and then as far as the little kid thing, I was stationed in the Philippines, and they called it baby bait.
Yeah.
And there'd be a lady out there crocheting at 2 a.m., and we'd be coming back from the bars, and she'd have this little girl holding a little cup. I mean, she couldn't have been more than 2 years old. And, of course, all us women would start yelling at the old lady. But, I mean, it's just called baby bait.
It makes you so – actually, you know, it's funny. Not funny. It's just weird. A couple weeks ago, I was outside of a supermarket, and there was a woman doing that very thing. She was sitting. She had a baby, a blanket wrapped around her. It was freezing cold. It was one of those freezing days. And a guy went up to her, and I heard him say, he goes, I know there's somebody sitting in a car right now making you do this. You don't have to do this, he said to the woman. And I was like, I shuddered listening to this. I don't know if he actually had good intel or not, but the idea that there's some dude sitting in a heated car letting her sit out there with a baby and just collect cash, it's freaky is what it is. And so it makes you cynical, too, because you start to – you see this stuff and you're like, this is a hustle. This is like, they're taking advantage of decent people, but it's a hustle.
Yeah, well, you see a lot of it in Manassas and Woodbridge. You see those folks standing on the corners, you know, trying to make a couple bucks. And I don't hand out $20. I'll hand out a couple bucks.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it's again, you know, your Christian duty gets to you. But this is why I say I like giving to like the food pantries, take care of them because, you know, if somebody needs a meal, go to a food pantry. That's what they're there for. And that's why we like supporting them. Thank you, Judy. I appreciate the call here. Let's see. Scott calling in from Castleton now on line 8. Scott, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello.
Hey, Vince. How you doing? Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
So when I was in college, I did a paper for my media studies class about homelessness, and I wanted to find out if they were truly just homeless or maybe they wanted to live on the street for whatever reason. But during my research, through interviews, I found out that a lot of these people were making about $60,000 a year on average.
What year was that?
This would have been 94, 95.
It's a long time ago. Yeah, $60,000 was a much bigger income back in the mid-'90s than it is now. So that's a pretty sizable chunk of change back then.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay, so you actually did the research. So look at this. We got a little bit of journalism. It's dated, honestly, but, you know, inflation adjusted. It's a pretty big deal, Scott.
Yeah, I decided not to go into journalism.
Good for you.
Same reason my brother decided not to go into politics.
Yeah, good for you. You probably saved your souls. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. That's
welcome. Have a good one.
Interesting call. Dave's in Alexandria, line 3. Dave, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Yeah, hi, Vince. Hey, you know, like you say, panhandling is all over. Maryland, D.C., Virginia. It doesn't matter what sort of neighborhood you're in. But the other day I was in Crystal City, and, you know, I used to give more than I do today just because of the, you know, frequency of it. But I couldn't help but give to this guy. I engaged him a little bit, and he had just been thrown out by his girlfriend, and he had 2 of the best-looking, well-behaved pit bulls with him, and they were just huddled together in a little blanket and so forth. I mean, how can you not give?
It's dog
like
bait.
That?
I know. It's the puppy bait. I know. Look. I'm not gonna say I don't fall for this stuff though. I do. I mean, it's like I'm like, all right, or especially if they've got a great attitude. They're super nice. They're not pushy. I'm like, you know, you do kind of get tempted, but I'd rather not live in a community where people have to panhandle all over the place or are. I mean, it becomes third world. It's like if you ever go to a third world country, or any country that's like a major tourist destination outside of the United States, typically, although we're becoming increasingly like this, there are people who are constantly hustling you. There are kids who are bumping into you, pickpockets. It's just madness all the time. And so this is like another step in that direction, and I don't know. I prefer to live in the great country that I was born in.
Yeah, and unless things change, I mean, nothing is going to make it go away, or it's certainly not going to get any better without major change.
Yeah.
Hopefully, change is coming in November.
I hope so too. And a good change would be a more pro-dog culture, kind of like you, Dave. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Let's see here. Let's see. Do I have time for this? Well, Mike, I'll take Mike in Bowie. He's line 7. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show on a different topic. He wants to talk Ukraine. Hello, Mike.
Yeah. Hey, Vince, how are you?
I'm good, Mike.
Okay, I'm driving through the ag farm, and they got rumble strips.
Gotcha.
The reason why I'm calling is that I just don't understand this anti-Ukraine. Why are people in love with World War III? I don't get it. I have friends of mine whose parents were killed by the Russians in the Balkans and Poland and Yugoslavia and Hungary and the rest of it. Yeah. And if we don't defeat Ukraine,
Russia, you mean?
If we don't defeat Ukraine, then we're going to be in World War III.
If you mean Russia, if we don't defeat Russia, is that what you mean?
No, I'm talking about we'll be in World War III against Russia, of course, duh. But I'm saying that if we don't win Ukraine, we're going to be in World War III. And I'm a very conservative Republican, but I'm also a grandfather of 25 and a great-grandfather of 14. So I would like them all to live and not be drafted.
Well, yeah, but as of today, it seems like we're a lot closer to World War III than when this all started. That's for sure. I mean, what is happening right now, the global realignment that you're witnessing, is not to our benefit. It is not going well at all. And Biden has been managing us into this chaos.
I know that.
Yeah.
So why do you want World War III? If you're against
I definitely
Ukraine,
don't.
Then you're in favor of funding You're in favor of World War III.
Well, no, that's reductive and kind of mindless. The reality is that we have. It is mindless, and here's why: because you can't talk in absolute terms like that. And here's the reason: because what America's witnessing right now is Washington D.C. selling our country out in the effort to take care of every priority in Ukraine's portfolio, including stuff that you don't even know about. How much money has Ukraine stolen from us, Mike? I mean, think about it. How much?
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it does. It absolutely matters. How much blood and treasure do they need to take from us?
It doesn't matter. It matters that we stop Russia in Ukraine because I don't want World War III.
That's precisely what I'm arguing for. What we're doing right now, Mike, what we are doing right now is bringing us closer to that very outcome.
Okay, well, you go right ahead. Welcome World War III. Just keep remembering that.
Again, mindless, because, again, the direction we're headed right now is closer to that. We have not done anything to mitigate Russia's currency or strength. In fact, we've only enhanced their position. That's the idiocy of this. And we've been, of course, funding both sides of that war. Hundreds of thousands of people are dying right now in a war that we are underwriting. We are losing money. We have no accountability. We have corruption like crazy over there. And guess who we're not helping? The American people. Our sovereignty is collapsing. And Washington tells us our priority is to generate World War III. That's what they're telling us. So it's literally, again, the opposite of what Mike is suggesting. Unfortunately. But that's the case. I'd like to keep my kid out of war. I think we'd like to all keep our kids out of war. That's an American priority, and that's what we should be focused on. It's 5. I know that we went from homelessness here in America, which, of course, we should be focusing on, to Ukraine's theft of all of our stuff. It's crazy. All right, I didn't get to it. We got pushed up against the clock. I'll tell you a little bit more tomorrow about the kid who's now suing Deadspin for their racism towards him. He's a Native American kid. He wore war paint to a Kansas City Chiefs game. The great one, Mark Levin, up next.